Hello, everyone. Hi, Geshe, can you hear me? Oh, it seems like I can't hear.
We can't hear Geshe.
Hello, everyone. Geshe, we can't hear you. So we're in the second session, second teaching on Chandra's Kirti's text, entering into the middle way. Thank you, Geshe, for the teachings. And just to say, I sent here the text again if anyone needs. And there is also a link below to support the teacher, to practice Dana and the activity on for the Dharma Friends of Israel. Geshema, ready if you need assistance. Still can't hear you. Okay, we'll just waiting to solve the issue, just a minute or two.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, good. Wow, what a mystery. I just don't get why it doesn't work the first time. Great. Okay. Sorry for that. Sorry for the delay. Okay, great. Shalom, everyone. Welcome back to, well, Chandakirti's wonderful text, Entering the Middle Way. Last time I gave you an introduction, but today we actually go right into the text. But before we start, as usual, I'd like to start with setting the motivation, which is one of the most important aspects of making a teaching, learning about the Dharma really beneficial or efficient. And I talked about it last time. What is also very beneficial is to visualize the Buddha in front of you. So even though we don't really know what the Buddha looked like, except for the fact that he probably looked Indian, or definitely looked Indian. So it's totally dependent on you how you visualize the Buddha. If you just visualize a presence, just for the sake of being inspired by someone who actually embodies the teachings, but not just the Buddha, also Chandakirti, who's the author of the text we're studying. Again, if you just visualize a presence without any details, and since we don't know what exactly he looked like, it's totally up to you. But just to visualize, for now, just those two great beings in the space in front of you. And then as we do a little bit of breathing meditation for a few moments, a minute or two, just to settle the mind. So you visualize their presence, Buddha and Chandakirti, in the space in front of you. We do a little bit of breathing meditation and then generate the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, in the sense of generating the motivation. So may this session become a cause for our own enlightenment. And in that way, we generate the mind of enlightenment. And I guide you through that short meditation. And after that, we'll recite the prayers together. So let's start with a little bit of breathing meditation. Just to be mindful of your breath moving in and out. And now, in the presence of the Buddha, fully enlightened being, and in the presence of the great Indian master Chandakirti, generate the wish to become fully enlightened. That is to actualize your fullest potential for the sake of all sentient beings. Wish to become a Buddha yourself. To be able to lead other sentient beings to the same state. And think, may this session also become a cause for me to remove what's extra in my mind, the obstructions to enlightenment. Again, to be of greatest benefit to myself and all sentient beings. And then with this motivation, without losing it, let's recite past refuge and bodhicitta, the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, and then the four measurables. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And then the 4 measurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay, all right. Now, the visualization that we did today was quite simple, and as we progress, I'll add a little bit to it, but just for now, I think that should suffice. And well, for today, I would like to do a meditation towards the end of the session, but I feel that I can only do that if I finish a certain part of the text. That is the actual text already. So as I said, the introduction, we're done with that. But I also want to address something. So last time I just spoke about the kind of historical place of this text, how it fits into the kind of Buddhist history or how it developed, etc., who translated it, and so forth. But what I'd like to address today, what I'd like to start off with is to talk about how we can utilize it, how we use this text, how we can use this text. That is, well, the question, of course, that arises is this text beneficial? Is it still relevant at this day and age? And can we actually use what we learn on a daily basis? Can we use this in our daily life? And the answer to that is, of course, yes. It's as relevant as it was 1,000 and something years ago, 1,200 years ago, as it is now, 1,000, well, more than that, 1,400 years ago, as it is relevant today. But it needs a little bit of work, and that's what I'm hoping to accomplish here, to show which aspect of the text is particularly helpful, what we can directly practice in our daily life. But it requires some explanation, and I'd actually like to start with something that His Holiness the Dalai Lama talked about during his last teachings. It was a question that one of the participants asked His Holiness, and I think it's so important. Then the way His Holiness explained it, I thought was really interesting, and I'd like to share that with you. So the question that a Tibetan student asked His Holiness, I think it was on probably the second day of the teachings, I don't remember clearly, but a Tibetan student, she asked His Holiness, His Holiness usually talks about Buddhism having 3 aspects: an aspect of religion, philosophy, and psychology. So you've probably heard, well, if you've listened to His Holiness's teachings before, you've probably heard His Holiness talk about this. You have the religious aspect of Buddhism, you have philosophy and science. So if you want to explain Buddhism, you can explain Buddhism in terms of those 3 aspects. Now, and so the question was, the question by the student was, well, this text His Holiness was teaching in praise of dependent arising, which of those 3 parts does the text belong to? And His Holiness said, well, it just depends. It depends on which aspect you utilize. Do you make it a religious practice? Do you take it philosophically, or you take it scientifically? So that was an interesting way of responding, because oftentimes it's explained that there are certain aspects in Buddhism, they're more religious, more aspects that are more philosophical, and more and aspects that are more scientific, which I don't think it contradicts that. But in this particular case with this text, well, you can take it in a religious way, in a philosophical way, or in a scientific way. And the same could be said about this text we're studying here, Entering into the Middle Way. Now, of course, what does religion mean? What does philosophy mean? What does science mean? Just to make sure we are on the same, well, we follow the same kind of idea here. Well, I looked it up. I just looked up some general definitions, and then, well, now I'm trying to apply this to our approach to this text. So, religion. One way to describe it is a particular system of faith and worship. That's one thing I found. And then another way to describe religion is a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe. Okay. Also, it involves worship of a superhuman entity, for instance, Buddha, creator God, or gods. And it usually involves devotional and ritual observancies, as well as a moral conduct or a moral code governing the conduct of human beings or human affairs. All right, so it talks about belief, a set of beliefs. Very important. It's mainly based on faith and belief. Worship of a superhuman entity. All right. It involves devotional and ritual observancies and a moral code. All right, so if we can agree on religion kind of, covers those aspects. What about philosophy? Well, philosophy can be defined in different ways, but I think here it basically refers to the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Okay, can be defined in a different way, of course, but well, that's usually, I think, in the Buddhist context, it's what we study. It's an academic discipline. When you study Buddhist philosophy, study of fundamental nature, knowledge, reality, etc., and considered an academic discipline, something you learn about, not academic necessarily of not putting it into practice, but first needing to understand it. And then you have science. So the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the natural world through observation and experiment. And in particular, science, so here, intellectual and practical activity, it encompasses study, the process of learning about the function, the structure, etc., of the natural world through observation and experiment. In particular here, the natural world in Buddhism is a science of the mind. If you speak of science, then it's a science of the mind. I talked about it last time. So a scientific study of the mind, the human mind in particular, its functions, its mental processes, especially with regard to how it affects our behavior. Now, here, with regard to which aspect is most important, I think we can all agree the scientific aspect. So the scientific, the science of the mind, the aspect of the science of the mind, that's most important. And I would even take it further. You're not just talking about psychology or science of the mind, but about applied psychology, in the sense that, I looked it up again. I mean, there's so many different ways of defining this, and I'm not even sure this is the correct definition, but it makes sense in terms of my own understanding. So the use of psychological methods and findings of scientific psychology, in terms of Buddhist scientific psychology, to solve practical problems of behavior, experiences of human behavior, human experiences, mainly human, of course, here as human beings. So now, are the other aspects still important? I believe so. There's the religious aspect, where we take certain aspects of faith, of belief and faith, because there's certain ideas in Buddhism that are presented which are very difficult for us for the time being to understand. So ideas of karma, we can have an assumption of it, a certain rough understanding, but in terms of the subtle working of any action has a result, an experiential result, well, very difficult to establish, very difficult to realize for us to understand. So it's a type of faith. Likewise, the ability, well, the fact that we can become enlightened, past and future lives, of course, those are all initially, if they make sense to us, we take them on faith temporarily until we come to a first-hand understanding ourselves. But there's also aspects in Buddhism of worship, of devotion, but all on the understanding, based on the understanding that those states of mind, based on the Buddhist scientific understanding, that those states of mind are good for us. They calm our mind, they give us a sense of joy, a sense of purpose. So those are developed as part of, for instance, studying this text, can be developed, having faith, experiencing a sense of joy, inspiration. So that would be the religious aspect. Just with respect to this text, but of course we can take it further to any kind of application of what's called the Dharma, or Buddhist Dharma, Buddha Dharma. Okay. So as I said before, of course, there's a moral code given here, there is devotional observances and so forth. So there's a religious part, definitely part of what's called the Buddha Dharma. Then there's the philosophical part, which concerns the understanding of the different ideas about the nature of reality, knowledge, reality. And some of the philosophies, they don't even refer to reality. They don't even reflect how things exist, in the sense that they're only temporary philosophies we study in preparation to understanding the final view, the final Buddhist view on reality. So there's the philosophical aspect. That's also part of this text. We learn aspects about the mind-only school to a certain degree. Not that many details, but there's some explanation on what the mind-only school means and so forth. But most important, of course, is the scientific aspect. So here it's an intellectual and practical activity. Practical in that we take it back to our own experience, we put it into practice and see whether it makes sense or not. It encompasses the systematic learning of the structure and behavior of the mind, mainly our own mind, which becomes our own petri dish through observation, mindfulness, and experiment. So we should experiment when, for instance, and that's one of the first things we're going to learn about compassion. Well, what does His Holiness say about compassion? It's the means, the methods to finding happiness ourselves and bringing happiness to others. Well, let's experiment with it. You've got a whole week in between to experiment with compassion, for instance. But for that, of course, we need to understand what is compassion, how is it described in this text. So, therefore, the scientific aspect, there is the religious aspect, the philosophical aspect, but most importantly, the scientific aspect. And I would recommend to take Buddhism as a science, as I said, of the mind, psychologically, as a means to understand our mind, first of all, and then make changes based on the understanding, and hopefully this understanding will grow as we go along, that all our problems come from the mind and the solution is found in the mind. All right, so I just wanted to give you that short introduction based on what His Holiness had said, and then of course as a way to now start to get into this text, entering the middle way. All right, now if you have read the commentary that I sent to you, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, and if you've read it, you've probably come to see you don't understand everything. You'll understand bits and there are parts that need to be explained to understand fully, but I don't think it's necessary to explain them here. This would be for a course that takes longer, where we have more time, etc. I just sent this to you because the aspects of what Lama Tsongkhapa said we'll discuss here. Other bits we just leave out, because I don't think for the scope of this, well, if you can call it course, or for the scope of these classes, it's not necessary. The only thing that is very, very helpful, and I'm definitely going to depend on to a certain degree, are the outlines, the way in which Lama Tsongkhapa puts headings, kind of uses headings like different outlines and giving them different names in order to then go through the text in a very structured and systematic way. All right. Now, as I said last time, or as I talked about it last time, so I'm just repeating this, the first thing that is traditionally done when you study a text, you don't ignore anything. You even study, you even try to understand the title, which usually the titles that are given are not catchy kind of titles. They're not given in the same way as nowadays books are, well, entitled. Even the titles explain the meaning of the text, give you an understanding of the text. So there's a short moment, there's a short while that you spend understanding the title. And we've already heard the title of this text is Entering into the Middle Way, where the middle way actually refers to a very, very important text on emptiness, which is Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom. Very important, very beautiful, but extremely difficult text. So it explains emptiness in all its details, all the different reasonings, why phenomena do not exist the way they appear to us, as a means to overcoming the root cause of all our trouble, which is a misapprehension of reality. Okay, so from a Buddhist point of view, this is one of the central Buddhist ideas, that not only do all our problems come from our mind, but they come from a misapprehension, a basic misapprehension of reality, because we perceive things in the way in which they cannot possibly exist. And that then leads to emotions that are harmful emotions, and all the other experiences, suffering, problems, difficulties, anxieties, that are part of our own life. And so in order to remove all these unwanted experiences of problems, anxiety, worry, and so forth, we need to tackle this root misapprehension of reality by way of understanding the thing, the object that it perceives, the thing that it perceives has no grounding in reality, has no basis in reality. And this is what this text sets forth here. So it's what's called emptiness. It's the ultimate nature of phenomena that is explained here and what we want to learn here about. And so this is described in Nagarjuna's text called the Fundamental Wisdom. And here the name of the text is called Middle Way. Okay, so when we say entering into the middle way or entering the middle way here does not refer to emptiness, it refers to Nagarjuna's text. So what does Chandrakirti's text do? It enables us to enter or engage in Nagarjuna's text, which means we are indirectly studying Nagarjuna's text and gaining understanding of Nagarjuna's text, Fundamental Wisdom, through Chandrakirti's text. So Chandrakirti is basically opening for us the meaning of this text, or presenting to us the meaning of Nagarjuna's text, which is, besides the Buddha's teachings, one of them, the Buddha's teachings, of course, they're most important, but of the Buddhist teachings that are not directly from the Buddha, Nagarjuna's text can be said to be one of the most important ones. So what Chandrakirti does is he allows us to enter to engage in the meaning of Nagarjuna's text, by way of not only describing what Nagarjuna said, but also by way of supplementing, giving other explanations that are not given in Nagarjuna's text, supplementing them with, for instance, the method aspect, compassion, for instance. Nagarjuna does not explain in his text compassion, but Chandrakirti does. He does not explain the difference between philosophical systems such as the mind only, the Chittamatra, or he does not differentiate between the Madhyamika Svatantrika and Prasangika. Prasangika being the highest philosophical system, Svatantrika not being the highest, because of having some contradictions in their system, but still an understanding of the Svatantrika philosophical system is still very helpful in preparation for understanding the highest philosophical view. Okay, so if you've never heard of what I just said before, it'll be explained. Therefore, Chandrakirti, he supplements what Nagarjuna has not talked about. He supplements it with an understanding of the 6 perfections, for instance, which are, or 10 perfections as such, which are also not mentioned in that way by Nagarjuna. All right, so in this way, I think that should be enough. That's the meaning of the title. Entering into Nagarjuna's text by way of supplementing it, engaging in this text by way of adding certain things that are not present in Nagarjuna's text. Then the next outline that Lama Tsongkhapa, for instance, presents, so that's the meaning of the title. And then there's the translator's homage, paying homage to Manjushri. So here, this is the translator who translated the text, entering into the middle way, the Tibetan translator. So with regard to this person, paying homage to Manjushri, the Buddha of compassion, as a way to complete the text. It's seen as just paying homage is seen as a cause to be able to complete the text, to receive the inspiration of the object of homage, Manjushri, the Buddha the Buddha of wisdom. And further, it also implied by paying homage to Manjushri, we understand that therefore this text describes wisdom. It describes the wisdom of emptiness. All right. Then the next part is the meaning of the text itself. And then the last outline is the conclusion of the text. So the whole text has these 4 outlines: meaning of the title, translator's homage, the whole text itself, and then the conclusion. All right. But those are just the kind of basic outlines. And then you have subdivisions. Now, when it comes to the actual treatise, and I'm not going to go through all the outlines because just the outlines, they're too confusing. But just to give you the 4 basic ones. And now the text goes into, well, the treatise itself, the text itself. We've covered the title, we've covered the homage, the praise by the translator. Now we'll start with the actual words of Chandrakirti. So the text starts with saying, the disciples and medium Buddhas arise from the excellent sages. If you have the text in front of you, and already that is pretty difficult. Like this first text, the first 4 lines, as I said last time, with those 4 lines, Chandrakirti praises compassion, pays homage. That's just a conservative way of saying, well, he pays homage, he praises compassion. So starting a text, traditionally, the author starts off with saying, oh, there it is. The author starts off, oh, here, I read the older version, I just realized. The author, who is Chandrakirti, starts off with praising something particular, in this case, compassion. Now, what you see here is Shravakas and middle-level Buddhas arise from sovereign sages. Okay, so the version I have is still an older version. This is part of Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. Both had the same author. Here the author is, the same translator, Thupten Jimpa, but this is a newer version of Chandrakirti's text. And the version that is part of Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary that you have in English, that's still the older version. So here he talks about Shravakas, middle-level Buddhas, sovereign sages, and then the next line, Bodhisattvas. Shravakas, middle-level Buddhas, sovereign sages, or Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Okay, so actually sovereign sages is just another word for Buddhas. I'm not sure I like this translation, but of course any translation is subjective and it's totally up to the person. Well, in English there's no rule as such. In Tibetan you have certain words that are always used to translate something. In English you don't have that, which has its advantages and disadvantages like anything. So here the translator says sovereign sages, which literally in Tibetan, and literally it means the Tibetan word here is the able one, the forceful, the strong, or the powerful, able one. That's another word for a Buddha, being very able, having a lot of abilities. So sovereign sage is just another word for Buddha. And here the first line says, Shravakas and middle-level Buddhas arise from Buddhas. Now, what are Shravakas? What are middle-level Buddhas? So the two types of person, if you like, Shravakas and middle-level Buddhas, they arise from the Buddhas. And Buddhas are born from Bodhisattvas. Now here, what Chandrakirti does, he talks about four types of person, four types of practitioners, if you like, or, well, four types of beings who've put into practice the Buddha Dharma. Because Buddhism, as I said, you can take Buddhism as an applied science. So in other words, applied psychology, in the sense that you gain an understanding of your own mind, then gain an understanding of what is it that benefits you and what is it that harms you, which states of mind, which functions of the mind, which behavior, which mental behavior harms you, which thoughts harm you, in other words. And then through meditation, through familiarization, etc., through certain practices, you then eliminate those negative states of minds and cultivate the positive ones. And that leads to a certain person with a certain mind, and those certain resultant persons, if you like. So those are Shravakas, middling Buddhas, as they're called here. Wait, I have to go into my own new version of the text. So Shravakas, middle-way Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Buddhas themselves. Okay, so Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, you're probably familiar with those two, Shravakas and middling Buddhas. Shravaka is just another word for hearer. So you may be more familiar with the word hearer. And then middling Buddhas is another word for pratyeka Buddhas, or solitary realizers. Those are four resultant states, like they refer to people that certain types of, beings, beings who are the result of Buddhist practice. And as you probably know, Buddhism has two main goals. Of course, one goal is to be happy in this lifetime, and that's what we start off with, to find happiness in this life, to deal with our problems, etc. That's definitely one of the goals, but there are two main goals. Those are the main purposes for why the Buddha actually taught the Dharma. One is liberation and one is enlightenment. So becoming liberated from all our problems, our difficulties, by way of removing the root cause of all our troubles, that is the misapprehension of reality. That's one goal. And the second goal is to become fully enlightened, to become a Buddha. So to not just remove what's in the way to become liberated, but to remove some residues that were left by the misapprehension of reality. So not just the misapprehension of reality itself, but what it left behind in the mind, what's called imprints, to also remove those. All right, so therefore you have two goals. And in accordance with those two goals, you have Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, or Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. Now, liberation, becoming liberated, refers to the two types of beings. So, wishing to be liberated from all our trouble, if that is our own aspiration, if that's the only thing we wish for, then we'll at some point become Shravakas or Pratyeka Buddhas. So we become hearers. Shravakas, another word that's used in English, are hearers, and solitary realizers, or middle-level Buddhas, as they're called here. So what is the difference? And Lama Tsongkhapa talks about them a little bit. Well, Shravakas are basically practitioners of the Buddha Dharma who are more social, who depend a lot more on a teacher, receiving teachings, etc. So one word for them is hearer. Hearer is it's an English word that reflects the Tibetan word, which means someone who listens to the teachings, who receives a lot of teachings, listens to the teaching, hears a lot of teachings. It also has another meaning. Shravaka can also mean someone who hears a lot of teachings and then also teaches them to others. Okay, it may even be teachings that lead a person to enlightenment, although they themselves are not interested in enlightenment. So, therefore, hearers or Shravakas, there are those who want to become liberated, and they just have a certain personality that is much more social. And then you have solitary realizers. Solitary realizers, in a sense, as the word implies, they're much more solitary. They don't need that many teachings. A lot of their understandings are coming from their own reflection, their analysis. They do receive teachings. Yes, definitely they receive teachings, but not as many. They don't require as many as the hearers do. So those are solitary realizers. They're also called Pratyeka Buddhas. That's the Sanskrit word. Why? Because they don't aim just for liberation. They basically want to become Buddhas. They want to actualize their fullest potential, but not for the welfare of all sentient beings, but for their own benefit, for their own, well, to actualize their fullest potential. And so what they reach is not full enlightenment, because full enlightenment can only be attained if it's for the welfare of all sentient beings. But they reach, of course, liberation, which is, an incredibly important state. And therefore, well, they're called middling Buddhas, as in like, they're not, if you take those three, so the Shravakas, Buddhas themselves, so that are expressed in the first line. So Shravakas, solitary realizers, and then sovereign sages, which are Buddhas. Of those two, they're in the middle. Shravakas are not, in terms of their spiritual accomplishment, not as high as solitary realizers, but they're not. But Buddhas are higher than them, so they're right in the middle. Okay, which is basically, therefore, the first line is saying, in other words, Shravakas and or hearers and solitary realizers, those two practitioners, their cause are Buddhas. Okay, so they depend on Buddhas. They arise in dependence on Buddhas. So what is the cause of those two practitioners who aim, whose goal, or whose not goal is such, but who will eventually attain what's called self-liberation? Those two are hearers and solitary realizers. So what is their main cause? It's the Buddhas. The Buddhas give rise to them. But then the question that arises is, so what are the causes of Buddhas? Well, the causes of Buddhas are bodhisattvas. That's what it says in the second line. Now, what you may wonder is, why are Buddhas born from bodhisattvas? Isn't it the other way around? Bodhisattvas are the result of Buddhas? Because in the first case, we talk about these practitioners of what is called the Hinayana path, or the Pali tradition, in terms of the goal being liberation. The goal being liberation, that which they attain is liberation. So therefore, Shravakas and middle-level Buddhas, or hearers and solitary realizers, if you use the usual words for them, well, how do they arise from Buddhas, from sovereign sages or Buddhas? Well, because they receive teachings from Buddhas. Therefore, their causes are Buddhas, because a Buddha, basically, or indirectly, someone else teaches them what the Buddha has taught. Buddhas, are they not likewise the result from other Buddhas, as in, like, before they became Buddhas, there were other Buddhas that taught them, and so therefore their causes must also be Buddhas? Well, in a way, yes, but here Buddhas come from bodhisattvas, means a Buddha can only become a Buddha if he or she was previously a bodhisattva. So bodhisattvas give rise to Buddhas in the sense that first you become a bodhisattva, and then eventually you attain the state of a Buddha. All right. And so what gives rise to bodhisattvas? Well, here it says the compassionate mind, non-dual cognition, as well as the awakening mind. These are the causes of bodhisattvas. All right. So here it says, what gives rise to Hinayana practitioners, that is, practitioners of the Pali tradition, Shravakas and middle-level Buddhas? Well, it's the Buddhas, sovereign sages, or the Buddhas. What gives rise to Buddhas? Bodhisattvas. What gives rise to bodhisattvas? Those three: the compassionate mind, non-dual cognition, and the awakening mind. These are the causes of bodhisattvas. So those three. And of those three, the main cause is compassion. Those three, the main is compassion. Now, passion is what I want to talk about here today, but I still need to explain this non-dual cognition. What is this non-dual cognition? It's an understanding of reality. It's the understanding of how phenomena really exist, which is, of course, is part of this text. Huge part of this text, or main part of this text. And it's non-dual cognition in the sense, an understanding of reality based on compassion, based on great compassion. So it's not just non-dual cognition, it's not just an understanding of emptiness in general, but one that is influenced by compassion. And likewise here, the awakening mind, well, the awakening mind usually is described as bodhicitta. It's just another word for bodhicitta. But because we say it's the cause of a bodhisattva, it cannot be bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is not the cause of a bodhisattva. A cause needs to precede its result. So bodhicitta does not precede a bodhisattva. Why? Because the moment you have bodhicitta, you are a bodhisattva. A cause has to always precede, has to always go before, has to precede its result. So if the result is a bodhisattva, then the cause must precede being a bodhisattva. But it's actually simultaneous. The moment you have the awakened mind, the moment you have bodhicitta, you are a bodhisattva. So what is bodhicitta? What is bodhicitta? It's the wish to become enlightened. It's the wish to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. Okay, so here what is explained is, here awakening mind is not bodhicitta. It's not bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is not just the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, but it's spontaneous. It's, they call it uncontrived. So it's like spontaneous in that once you have actual bodhicitta, it arises spontaneously. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to meditate on it. in the sense like, okay, I want to have bodhicitta now, just let me think about the reasons for a moment. For instance, when I started this session, I asked you to generate the mind to become enlightened, the mind that wishes to become enlightened. That is not actual bodhicitta, because you need to make an effort. It doesn't come spontaneously. You need to make an effort to generate that mind. And it's, if anything, it's uncontrived. But what's important is, in order to have a spontaneous wish to become enlightened, you need to develop an artificial version, a contrived or artificial version of that mind. Otherwise, no way you will at some point generate the mind to become enlightened, the wish to become enlightened. And in order to become enlightened, you need to have the wish to do so. So when I said bodhicitta is a mind that wishes to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings, it needs to be spontaneous. And what else? Its other characteristic is that once you have that mind, all your actions are directly or indirectly influenced by the wish to become enlightened. So right now, I don't think all our actions are influenced by even if we generate the mind that wishes to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings, but right now, all our actions are not influenced by that. Okay. Now, therefore, here the awakening mind refers to the artificial version, the version that needs to precede actual bodhicitta, the contrived version, if you like. Contrived just means artificial or not spontaneous, basically, in this context. All right. So a bodhisattva needs to first develop that type of fake awakening mind, if you like. Fake it until you make it kind of idea. So this version of contrived bodhicitta, that's also one of its causes. Okay. Now, therefore, a bodhisattva, particularly a bodhisattva of greater mental capacity. So a bodhisattva of greater mental capacity, we differentiate between, we can divide bodhisattvas into those of greater mental capacity and weaker mental capacity from the point of view of whether they understand emptiness before they generate bodhicitta, right? So this is not a judgment or anything. In both cases, you can become a Buddha. In one case, you realize emptiness before you generate bodhicitta. In the other case, you first generate bodhicitta and then realize emptiness. Eventually, you will realize emptiness. But here we're talking about someone who first tries to understand how do phenomena really exist before wishing to become enlightened. All right. So this is really what this first verse is talking about. It's saying, look, there's certain results, such as the state of being a Shravaka or a solitary realizer, that is a middling Buddha, and their cause is a Buddha. A Buddha gives rise to those two practitioners. But a Buddha also is the result of a bodhisattva, of being a bodhisattva before becoming a Buddha. And what gives rise to a bodhisattva? Well, the practice of compassion, of non-dual cognition of reality, as well as the contrived or artificial, if you like, non-spontaneous bodhicitta. Those are the causes of a bodhisattva. And of those, and that's just implied, and it becomes obvious also from the next verse, the cause of all those two, natural cognition and awakening mind, is the compassionate mind. So bodhicitta, if you have these three factors, compassion, non-dual cognition, and non-spontaneous bodhicitta, of those, compassion is the root of the other two. So compassion is the root of non-dual cognition of reality, here a kind of cognition of emptiness that is influenced by compassion. And here the non-spontaneous awakening mind, its cause is also compassion. So compassion is the cause of everything. In the sense that without compassion, you wouldn't have non-dual cognition here, as it's described here, this kind of non-dual cognition, and you wouldn't have the non-spontaneous awakening mind. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have bodhisattvas. If you didn't have bodhisattvas, you didn't have Buddhas. And if you didn't have Buddhas, you wouldn't have Shravakas and middling Buddhas. So, in other words, the root of everything is compassion. This is what the first verses say, all right, in a very complicated way. But of course, it teaches us about Shravakas, about middle-level Buddhas. It teaches us certain aspects, but the main message is compassion. Wow, I made it. I was able to explain this first verse, to finally come to what I meant to explain, which is compassion. So that's really important for us. Really important for us. Practical. If we take Buddhism as an applied psychology, well, compassion, very, very important. So important. So important. But as taking it as a scientific method, an applied scientific method, is through observation and experiment, of course. So the experiment you have to do. It's not an external physical object that we can all experiment on. No, you have to generate compassion yourself. And then, well, I had that idea. I'll give you a homework for this week. What I would like you to do to generate compassion, and I'll explain what it is in a moment, the way it's defined here, because we all have some rough ideas, but in Buddhism it's specifically defined. I want you to generate this at least 20 times a day. Set an alarm if you like. Get one of those apps that notify you every, I don't know, however times that, how many times an hour that would be. You can do the math yourself. Set an alarm, take a moment and generate compassion the way I describe it to you in a moment, right? Just do the experiment. What does it do to you? What does it do to you? As Holiness the Dalai Lama talks about the way to really be happy, to find happiness, to find peace of mind, to be able to deal with our problems, to be resilient, to have power of the mind, is compassion. Well, don't just let that be a theory. Generate compassion 20 times for the next 7 days, and then, well, see what happens on next Sunday. That's the only way to do it. That's the only way to go about it. So, of course, it's up to you. I cannot check whether you did exactly that, but for a whole week, 20 times, if you cannot do 20 times, but I'm not talking about meditating for hours. I'm saying take a moment and generate the mind of compassion the way I describe it now. I'm not just talking about this is here a particular type of compassion. Okay. Now I'll need to say a little bit about more about compassion. What is compassion? It's not just empathy. It's not just being empathetic. It's not just feeling for the other person, understanding where they're coming from. It's more than that. It's much more than that. Empathy is that which leads to compassion, just understanding their suffering, feeling for the other person. Compassion has two very important aspects. One is it's a loving attitude. It's a type of affection. Having a feeling of closeness towards others, a feeling of caring, a feeling of affection, yes. So seeing others as endearing, understanding, and there's different ways to bring this about. Well, the easiest way to bring this about is to understand everyone wants to be happy and no one wants to suffer. We're all the same in that way. Whoever you meet, however weird they are, weird, of course, is subjective from my own perspective. So however weird that person is, however weird their dress, their religion is, their beliefs are, however weird, but that is only superficial. Deeper than that is their instinctive wish, innate wish to be happy and not to suffer. So whoever you meet on the street, you know that for sure. What brings forth that happiness and the absence of suffering, that can differ, but is that feeling of peace of mind, contentment to a certain degree, well, good old mental happiness. We can think of sentient beings that can create this feeling of closeness, that nearness, that we all have that in common with that person. We can take it further than that. It's just a little harder. The understanding that whatever faults they have, whatever problems they have, those faults, those afflictions, anger, hatred, misapprehensions, of course, it's not in the nature of their mind. It's only temporary. Just as our misapprehension of reality, our negative emotions, our hatred, anger, etc., it's not in the nature of our mind, neither is theirs. And to take it even further, they all have the potential to become fully enlightened. If you think along those lines, you can pick and choose whichever works better. But, and of course, if I tell you 20 times a day you need to do this, that means you need to meditate on that in the morning. It requires some more extensive meditation, because at least you make an effort to generate the first aspect of compassion, which is this feeling of closeness and care for others, affection, a feeling of closeness. And I'm not just saying for a single person, your children or your husband, your wife, your neighbor. No, for all sentient beings. Now, this is where it's harder, because the type of compassion we're talking about here does not just take a single person. It takes into consideration all sentient beings, without knowing all sentient beings, but taking into consideration any sentient being that is not a Buddha, and having affection for them, based on the understanding that they want to be happy, they don't want to suffer, based on the understanding that who they are is the product of their own mind. Who we are is really whether we're nice people or not nice people. It all comes down, our personality is a result of our own mind, but none of the negative aspects of the mind are in the nature of our own mind. It's not in the nature of our mind to be angry, etc. Why? Because anger and those negative hatred, etc., negative states of mind are all a result of the misapprehension, which again is not in the nature of the mind, because it can be removed. So therefore, that understanding, or the fact that having this mind in the nature of which is none of the negative aspects, having that mind means you have Buddha nature, and therefore that understanding guides you or enables you to generating affection towards all sentient beings. All right, so that's the first aspect. This you need to generate. And then to develop the wish for them to be free from suffering, to be free from any type of suffering. And here, this is hard to do, because suffering here means more than just ordinary experiences of suffering. It basically means you want them to be free even from just ordinary happiness that's not lasting, that doesn't give anyone full satisfaction, and you want them to be free from this limited mind and body. You want them to be free from all the limitations they experience. So great, here we're talking not just of compassion. I described compassion, but basically what I would like you to do, and whether you can do it or not, just take whatever you can, like whether you just take all sentient beings, may they be free from all their problems and difficulties, you can take that as part of your homework, if you like. But you could also generate, and however fake it is, never mind, but to really just generate the thought, this loving attitude towards other sentient beings, non-Buddhas, so any living being who's not a Buddha, just feeling of care towards them, affection towards them, and the wish for them to be free from any limitation that's not part of their mind. So you choose which one you like, try whatever you can, and I'm stressing fake is okay. Why am I stressing this? Because scientifically, just the other day I heard about this again. They talked about the stress of corona, etc., and some experiment that you may have heard about, some research on the fact that when you're terribly depressed and unwell, just smiling will automatically make a change. So it's like you just force yourself basically to smile, and that has psychologically a positive effect. So even without kind of reason why you should be smiling, etc., except for the fact that you hear it's beneficial, there's a fake smile, and that has some benefit. So here we're not talking about a fake smile, we're talking about a fake type of compassion that doesn't arise spontaneously. So fake in the sense like it's not that spontaneous type. You try to generate it, but that's part of the experiment. Okay, so to repeat, It can be compassion where you try and make it all sentient beings, however abstract that is, but to not exclude anyone, any non-Buddha. We don't need to have compassion for a Buddha, so you can leave out the Buddhas. Any non-Buddha, any living being, whoever they are, animal, human, or whatever, whoever they are, may they be free from suffering. Okay? Any living being, may they be free from suffering. So you could just take any unwanted experience of suffering, or you can take any limitation. Okay? Any limitation, anything that's not part of their mind, anything such as, having first of all, any limitation that's not part of their mind, or even their experiences, their limited experiences of happiness that they experience as part of samsara, and also the wish for them to be free from this limited mind and body altogether. Okay, so whatever you can generate, and for that you need to, of course, start off in the morning. In the morning, you meditate on compassion, first generating this kind of affection towards all sentient beings, and then reflecting either on all their different sufferings, like problems, difficulties that we would ordinarily call problems, so the suffering of suffering, that's the actual term for that. Or you take it further, you reflect on also their suffering of change, their ordinary happiness that's very limiting, that keeps them attached to samsara. Or pervasive conditioned suffering. You generate the wish for them to be totally free from this limited mind and body. And even take it further, free from any limitations, wishing them to be free from any limitations that are in the way for them to become Buddhas. Any of those, if you generate this in the morning, it leaves something behind, this meditation that you do. So developing those two aspects, all sentient beings, affection towards all sentient beings, and then the wish for them to be free from all these limitations. If you meditate on that in the morning for, let's say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour if you want. So you do a very focused meditation on compassion, and I think we can do this together today. Doing that, then throughout the day, it becomes easier. It becomes easier. You've left strong imprints in the mind for then to just have a few moments reflecting on what you've done in the morning and go right back into it. And this you have to do 20 times. And once you've done that 20 times, you do it again the next morning. You start off again with your meditation. So please note it down. Don't forget, this is part of the scientific experience of the effectiveness of compassion. Okay, so you're part of this experiment. The petri dish is your own mind. No one can do it for you. You cannot meet, or you couldn't meet, but in the end, it's not like you have one external object that you can all observe. You have your own object of observation, which is your own mind. All right. So I've had my doubts about, should I do this or should I ask you to generate compassion when you have problems? I decided, well, it's a little harder having a problem with another person, etc. So for this week, the focus is on 20 times, whether it's in a situation where you have a problem or not, when you're calm, etc. Possibly it's preferable to be calm in that moment. It's a little easier. So for this first week, like I said, 20 times. All right, great. Now, having said this much, a little further explanation I'd like to give you on compassion, because what I've introduced you to was not just ordinary compassion. I have introduced you to what is called great compassion. Okay, so I've not used the word great to add to compassion, but ordinarily we do distinguish between compassion and what's called great compassion. Compassion we all have. We have biologically, we have innately. This Homeless Dalai Lama would talk of like biological compassion, which kind of just means inborn, that we all have to a certain degree, which means when we see another person suffer, and if in that moment we don't totally resent this person, there's a sense of closeness towards that person, a sense of care or affection for that person, and then the wish arises, may they be free from that problem. Or it may not be in those words, but the wish for them to be free from that problem. And that is responsible for us to go out of our way and possibly help them. Okay, so when you see someone trip on the road, an elderly woman falls over, and you run towards this person and help her to get up and pick her up, well, it's out of compassion. You've had a moment of compassion there, though you may not be aware because you're watching her and you're more concerned in that moment with this woman. You're distracted by that, but you've had a moment of compassion there, and that is called ordinary compassion. That is not what's called great compassion. What is the difference between ordinary compassion? Well, it's usually focused on a particular person, usually someone you know, plus it's usually not just affection for a particular person, but it's compassion. It's the wish for a person to be free just from ordinary problems. Okay. Here, I'm asking you to, if you can, maybe you take all sentient beings. That's a little easier, although we don't know all sentient beings, but the sense of like, whoever there is, even if I don't know them, I wish them to be free from suffering. So you can take ordinary suffering, but you can also take it further, any limitation. But when you take any limitation, you should have a background in some of the Buddhist ideas, at least have an understanding of the three types of suffering: suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and pervasive conditioned suffering. All right. But I don't know who's present, who's part of this group here, learning about entering into the middle way. So I cannot say. I'm just saying I'm recommending for those who are new to this, just take good old suffering. If you are not new to it, and you want to take it further, you don't just want them to be free from ordinary suffering, but from all their limitations, you need to, of course, reflect upon what is wrong with these limitations. What is wrong with samsaric happiness? How does it keep us trapped in samsara? How does our attachment to our mind and our body keep us trapped? And how understanding the limitations of suffering of change, that is ordinary samsaric happiness, as well as understanding of the limitations of mind and body, what these limitations are, and how freedom from this is so important to gain freedom from suffering. Well, once we have that understanding, we can sincerely wish for ourselves to be free from those, but also for others to be free from those. So usually, and of course, if you can make it part of your meditation, it would be that you first take a moment to reflect upon your own samsaric happiness, that this is limited and keeping you in samsara, and then your own mind and body, how that is limited, and the wish for them, for yourself, to be free from the three types of suffering. So that's called renunciation. That's another word for renunciation, the Buddhist term renunciation. It's not the same renunciation you have in daily life. No, but there's a certain mental factor that's called renunciation, which is just another word for saying the wish for ourselves to be free from ordinary suffering, but also our samsaric positive experiences, as well as this mind and body. So once you wish for yourself to be free from those, you understand they're limited, and you wish for yourself to be free from them, then if you've generated affection, you then can also generate the same wish for others. Okay, so the meditation that you're supposed to do early in the morning has become a little bit more complicated if the kind of suffering you wish others to be free from involves also any type of limitation, such as suffering of change and pervasive conditioned suffering. Because first you need to look at it yourself, wish yourself to be free from it, and then you apply it to others. Okay? All right, so it's a little bit of complicated meditation. Take whatever you can. If you have a background in Buddhism, you'll understood everything I said so far, I believe, and you can just apply that and you can fit it into a half an hour, 20 minutes meditation. But whatever you've taken from that, the point is you generate compassion and you experiment with it. Okay. All right. Now we got some time. We have some time. And I like to do the meditation with all of you together to give you a sense of what I'm talking about as part of the experiment, the compassion experiment. Of course, more importantly, part of the study of this text, which emphasizes compassion so much. All right? Okay, let's do this. So, as usual, we start off with a few moments of breathing meditation to be able to let go of any disruptive thoughts, any thoughts of the past or the future, to just be in the present. And now take a moment to reflect on your own situation. And the fact that not only do we experience a lot of problems and difficulties in our life that we naturally want to be free from, even our happy experiences are the results of our wrong view of the I. And they're therefore limited in that it's pure samsaric happiness, inducing attachment for our limited existence. It's a type of happiness that doesn't last. And fails to give us real satisfaction. So generate the wish, may I be free from this limited happiness. To then be able to experience lasting happiness. And what is the cause for this these limited experiences we have, it's this mind and this body, which right now are very fragile, full of limitations. And so generate the wish, may I be free from this limited mind and body. But of course, I'm not alone. There are endless sentient beings who are just like me in that they want to be happy and don't want to suffer. Who deserve to be free from their suffering, just like I deserve to be happy. Whose minds are just like my own mind, free from, whose actual nature of the mind is free from any negative or afflictive emotion. And who will have the potential to become a Buddha. So generate a sense of closeness and care towards all sentient beings. Even though I don't know them right now, there's no reason why I couldn't get to know them. Learn about their good qualities, and come to understand that there are no evil beings, but that all our negative qualities are the result of a basic misapprehension of reality. And that out of this affection, out of a sense of closeness towards all sentient beings, generate the wish for them to be free from suffering. Vastly to be free from the suffering of suffering. That is any type of physical and mental pain. May all dear sentient beings be free from any unpleasant experiences. Try to really feel that from the depth of your heart. And not just that, may they also be free from their limited samsaric happiness, to replace it with something much greater, more satisfactory. And may they overcome their limited mind and body, and instead be liberated from all that causes them to have these limitations. Try to really feel this deep in your heart. Okay, so let's slowly arise from that meditation. So hopefully, although it was a little bit rushed maybe, but hopefully it gave you a sense of how you could go about it, meditating on compassion as part of your morning preparation, to then be able to generate whatever passion you end up with, generate that again and again throughout the day. But one part, and that's why I stopped the meditation instead of usually I go right over into the dedication. But one point I want to make is, of course, it's really important to generate also compassion for yourself. That is also a sense of affection towards yourself. And if you find you cannot have that, well, you need to work on that. On understanding that, like anyone else, you deserve to be happy. So the wish for yourself to be happy, to be okay with your limitations, your faults, etc., understanding that they're only temporary and that you have endless positive qualities. Definitely the potential to become a Buddha, which is so precious, and therefore deserve to be happy, need to find that happiness to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. So that needs to definitely, if you find you don't have that, well, work on that. That's really important to have that self-love and self-compassion. Okay, great. All right, so that's your homework for this week to repeat. You start off with a meditation in the morning, and whatever mind you generate as a result of that meditation, towards the end of the meditation, this compassion towards all sentient beings, including yourself, you then generate it 20 times a day. Okay? Even just for a few moments. So that's the experiment. That's the scientific part of, the experiment. Okay, great. Now, whatever positive potential that we've accumulated here together, may that become a cause for us now to generate great compassion, to generate bodhicitta, go through the stages, generate the different stages of the path to then eventually become a fully enlightened Buddha. So before we recite the dedication prayer, take a moment to mentally dedicate any positive potential towards your own enlightenment. And then having dedicated, let's recite Shantideva's dedication prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the hopeless find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all the medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and the people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I wish you a very nice week, a very compassionate week. Please try and give your best, try your best to do the homework. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Geshe-ma.
Thank you, Roland.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Thank you, Geshe-ma. Have a lovely week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Thank you, everyone. We'll meet here again next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Gracias.